a church plant that does make new disciples, very likely it will survive. I've been in some scummy places. I've got hepatitis. I've been diagnosed as malnourished. When you're under that kind of pressure, you want to know one thing. Are we doing what we came to do? And if you're not doing what you came to do, people's pain threshold drops dramatically, conflicts rise up, so blah, blah, blah. But if you're doing what you came to do, your whole team will tend to hang together better. You're explaining why we're here, right? And this is why we look at Evangelism Networks. Now, I'm not going to be sticking too closely to your notes because you've already got them, right? So click on to the next one. So one common idea I find when you're talking to people is that, so I was once walking down the road and I got a call from an area dean. And he said, would you come and talk to our group about church growth? And I said, well, I mean, I could do, but I mean, I don't know necessarily that much about church growth. I don't know more than other people. Because what he was doing is he was confusing church growth with church planting. We're about planting churches, and that means finding new people. Now, your church can grow without making any new disciples. It's perfectly possible. All it would take was for a nice big church next to you to tank in some kind of financial disaster or something. And lots of people would turn up at your church. It wouldn't mean that your church was any better. It wouldn't mean that you're making disciples any better. It wouldn't mean that you were kind of doing a better job. So one of the most exponentially growing denominations in this country over the last sort of 15, 20 years has been the Romanian Orthodox Church. They haven't necessarily been doing a great job. It's just that there's a lot more Romanians around. So you can get church growth without getting any kind of discipleship. You can also do evangelism without producing any church growth, like lots of people do it. So, and it's not a bad thing to do. You know, you're just spreading the word and people are going to get saved, you know, we hope, but it's not necessarily going to make any impact on your church. They might well go somewhere else. So the principles of church growth are often caused, let's assume that it's done for healthy reasons, is because people love your congregation, they thrive, there's love, there's good use of the gifts, there's a whole bunch of good things going on. And that will often cause your church to grow. Evangelism means you're sowing the word. But what we're going for here is this process of discipleship. And it actually, I've put that there as a third set, but in reality, you could almost think this is just two here. It's this bit. This is your evangelism. And this is your growth. But often the most exciting thing that happens in any church plant is when you see new people getting saved, growing, and moving into ministry. And that's like air in the lungs of the church planter. This is what we're here for, right? And this is why, as you form the church plant teams, knowing how you're going to do that, having an idea that you can loop back to, that you can change, and that you can explain to your team is absolutely fundamental. This is where you want visionary leadership. So, for example, with Encounter Church that Issa and I lead, this street kind of defines, it's like, how are we going to make disciples? Well, it's almost like by being on this street, by walking up and down the street, by doing things on this street, by talking to people on the street, by using the invitation channels off the shop, by building off, for example, some of the excellent digital work that people in the shop do to reach out. We reckon we can meet new people and introduce them to Christ. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, Are there any questions at this stage? So particularly we're here on the relationship between evangelism, church growth and discipleship, and the way that that affects your vision as you build vision. We good? We happy?
I think they interrelate themselves. You evangelize and disciple, and the church grows. So we know that they interrelate, although the emphasis for church planting is the discipleship.
Yeah,
It's a base. The base comes from when some faith comes by hearing. When the people don't hear, you can't disciple. Somebody didn't hear.
Yeah, there's actually lots of
Unresponded.
connections that move between these two, and not all of them are visible. So Mike Breen once said, he said, if you try and grow a church without making disciples, you won't grow the church. If you try and make disciples, you will make disciples and you'll grow the church.
Yeah.
So if your goal is to sort of build your own thing, then the chances are you're going to fail. And the reason why you might be failing is because Jesus said, all authority in heaven and earth is given to me, therefore go and make disciples, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you, and I'm with you to the end of the age. But almost the implication is if you're not trying to make disciples, if you're not trying to see people coming to new faith, then he's not going to be with you. Because you're not doing what he says. You have no need of his power, because after all, you're almost trying to build a human institution. And what evangelism, one of the things that evangelism does, as well as actually directly contributing, it creates an atmosphere within the church that tells people this is why we're here. We're here to make disciples. We're here to live under the authority of Christ. So there are actually lots of loop points between these two. Not just, well, I can point to this person who's coming from our evangelism. It's also a cultural thing within the church. I know I've said this, I may have said this before, there are two ministries of a church that will tend to sort of wither before others. That is prayer and evangelism.
Yeah.
Your meetings will go on, the teaching will go on, the fellowship will go on, the food bank will go on. But the evangelism and the discipleship are the things that will probably go first when things go bad. All right, we're going to go on to the next one. So, as you'll see in your sheets, we talk about your evangelism strategies as the space here where your call and your opportunity overlap. Second set of sets. Now, of course, this might change. That great church planting guru, Mike Tyson, once famously said, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Everyone's got an evangelism strategy until they get punched in the mouth. So your call is what God has laid on your heart. That's coming out of your vision. So if somebody said in your church, like, what's the call? What's the call on your church? So Pete, because you're not an Antioch, Pete, what's the call on your church?
Yes, so what we're encouraging every sort of member to do is to just in their everyday life be sharing faith with their colleagues, classmates, neighbours, whatever. And at the same time, we're calling people in sort of regular intervals to get involved in some corporate stuff where they're involved, whether it's street evangelism or prayer walking or different things. So the call is kind of twofold. It's the informal when we're scattered to be a witness and an example and to be looking for opportunities. And then secondly, to be actually doing some things collectively as we're able to, that are a bit more, that keep that conversation going, that try and stoke the fire. Does that kind of answer you?
Kind of, but I mean, there are the things that we do, and then there's the thing that God has called us to specifically. So if you read, for example, if you read The Purpose-Driven Church,
Yeah.
Rick Warren says, look, there are lots and lots of churches. Of course, he's in America, he's in California, so there are genuinely lots of churches, like so many churches. And he says, who are you trying to reach? Who are your people? And he comes up with this idea of like Saddleback Sam. I can't remember what his wife's called.
Sally.
Is it? Sorry?
I don't know. Could be Sam as well.
I can't remember. But he comes up with this idea, is like, this is why we planted this church.
Right.
That's who we were trying to reach. So it's almost like we had a call. And then your opportunity is, who can you reach within your call?
Yeah.
So, for example, for Hope Church in Longside, we want to be a church that reached Longside. But one of the bottom lines for us in that is that it had to be a church that worked for South Asians. If it didn't work for South Asians, it wasn't reaching Longside. It was like bouncing, for us, it would be bouncing over the top of Longside. It didn't have to reach just South Asians, but it had to be able to work for South Asians.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the sort of hard times when, a South Asian guy, I mean, he wasn't like super stable, so he wasn't necessarily saying this out of a great place. He said, basically, give up. Don't bother. Your church will never reach South. Just stick with middle class workers. That's what you need to do. It's like, okay, thanks for that. So our call is to reach Longside, and it has to work for this kind of person. Now, what's the opportunity within that call? Who are the people who are going to respond in Longside? Yeah, go on, Susan.
We may have families, we may have individuals that we can seize the opportunity to reach out to them. And we may have people from other places, people group, language group, or ethnic group, whoever we found there.
Yeah, and we're going to go into what happens when. So in many church plants, if you have a call and an opportunity, say other things being, say you want to work with people of South and West Asian heritage, which is one of the things that this happens here. If you simply say, well, okay, that's our focus, you'll end up working with the most responsive groups, subgroups from that, which will be Iranians. They're the ones who are going to, they're the ones who respond to the gospel quickest. And you have to work out, when you bring your call and opportunity together, are you comfortable with that? We're actually going to go into some of the case studies. So one of the things that happening, for example, in City Life Church right now, is the most responsive people within City Life, the people who are, looking for discipleship, they're hungry for the Word of God, the people that the church is good at reaching, are East Asian. So the question for City Life Church is, well, is that going to be our unique focus? So we've got call, we've got opportunity. So we're trying to reach all the peoples, but wait, how are we going to end up working with people who aren't from that group? Do you see what I mean? So sometimes those ethnic groups, people will come into the church, will be discipled often within blocks, but that could then give you another problem, that they can actually begin to dominate the church. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So, for example, I spoke to her, and she came to some kind of faith. She joined the church, and always sort of necessarily that well. But that's an example of a call to the people of Longside, because she was local, and the opportunity. So what goes on in the market was actually one of the reasons why we looked at Longside. And But for Hope Church, it's been, in some ways a hard road. It was a hard first 3 years for the church. Like I was fully expecting, you're going to have a hard first year, you're going to get punched in the mouth, you're going to keep going, and then you're going to break through. First year came around, maybe things were happening, and COVID hit, we lost our entire fringe, and we kind of had to start again. So basically 2/3 of the church on any given Sunday has joined since COVID.
Praise God.
So let's look at this. Okay, so this is New Life in Salford, and New Life in Salford has got call and it's got opportunity. So its call is to Salford, to lots of different kinds of people. But actually, a lot of the response to the gospel has come out of what they've done in and around Salford Precinct. So this is the Thursday evening Bible study. Many of those people are there on a Sunday, but actually the majority of people who are there on a Sunday are not in this Bible study, right?
Yes.
So what you've got is you've got call and opportunity within the Evangelism Network, and then almost sort of where the church is good at growing is one thing, but actually they're ploughing harder ground in terms of actually discipling the people that they're meeting in Salford, and that then becomes a challenge for the church. Because if you want to disciple the newest Christians, the non-Christians, it's almost like you're going to be discipling people who are in the Thursday Bible study, but then your church culture might be going in another direction on a Sunday, and that's something that Solomon, he thinks about and he works on. I don't know if you've actually seen that. Sunday,
we've seen it.
That he's very keen to kind of to diversify the Sunday culture to make sure that it doesn't become dominant. Partly because
He involves everybody.
Exactly.
He tries to
Exactly.
not to allow another group
That's great.
rise too much.
Exactly. And that's because the church has got a call. It's got an evangelistic opportunity that's coming out of its work in Salford Precinct. But many of the disciplers or his worship leaders are coming from a completely different track. They're coming from a personal connection with Solomon. We've already seen here in City, I just randomly pulled something out from City Life Church. City Life Church has been effective in two different areas. So we've seen a number of Iranians get baptized. So that's evangelism, and it's effective evangelism. But because they don't live in the city centre permanently, it hasn't translated into conversion-based growth. It's conversion, but it's not conversion-based growth. And so the people who are engaging longer term in City Life Church will often be East Asian. And that then gives the leadership the question, like, what do we do now? Okay, so we have a call to reach the peoples of the city centre. We have this opportunity. How are we going to work this opportunity that we have, and how are we going to make that fit with our overall vision? So these are all examples, not of how those strategies were sort of cooked in the team phase, but actually how they evolved in the post-launch phase.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Now, Cheetham Hill was something that was really, it was hard. There was a core, there may have been opportunities, but the church struggled to get people to stick. That the church's culture, for whatever reason, I don't understand all of the reasons for that. It struggled to get new people coming in, sticking, contributing, sort of snowballing the church.
And also what we often found was that people would stick for long enough for us to feel like they were really becoming part of things, and then would leave without explanation.
Yeah.
So people would be around for not just a kind of week or two, but sort of months at a time, and then be gone.
Yeah.
And that happened quite a number of times, which is the kind of thing that's like hard to then,
It's like getting punched in the face.
Well, yeah, it's a bit like that.
'Cause
You kinda have to
you've
keep everybody
invested
back up
so
again.
much at that stage. Then, if it's several months, haven't you? If people get hopeful, then it looks like it's going somewhere really good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and this is the thing, is like your evangelism, your ability to evangelize, your ability to see the lost saved, your ability to see the kingdom of God sort of come through changed lives is basically, that's why people come with you. If you kind of say, well, this is going to be great, we're going to have a great time, I don't want to see anyone like get saved or lives change that much, but it's going to be good. Like, you're going to have no team. No team's going to come with you, or if they do come with you, they're going to be completely the wrong kind of people.
Yeah.
And this is what, this is one of the hard things in Cheatham.
Yeah, I think we also experienced that in the Suffolk New Life one, and we try to establish a prayer day, a specific time to pray, and we Solomon says that we are really trying to keep that Bible study. We are very keen to that Bible study group, because that's the base of the New Life Church, not the Sunday where people just come and go. So we are really very keen on that. And I see what you were saying before. Otherwise, the people group may dominate, as you say, and it's true. So the vision is for the people in Salford. And that's where we are. And some came and some have gone. And each time we are praying that God should bring them or bring more people in Salford.
Yeah.
And we also been praying that Solomon should live in Salford. Because when he's far away also, it makes it difficult.
Sure.
For those of us who are still also like strangers, we don't know how to go around and do many things.
Yeah. This is, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just agreeing.
So this is one of the ways that vision, which you care about, shapes what, even if you don't have it, it shapes what you pray for.
Yeah.
So as we look at venue, your Sunday venue, so bringing your Sunday venue closer to, say, Pendleton Gateway, as closer to Pendleton
Yes, that's
Gateway.
where we want it to be.
It's, again, what you pray for is birthed out of your vision, which again is birthed out of how you're making disciples. So many ways of evangelism strategy. I mean, to use the kind of techno speak, the next stage, establishing rhythms of prayer, Bible study, and worship, it's almost establishing your culture. Whereas when you're working on your evangelism strategy, it's establishing your vision, like what you're trying to do. And it's almost your leader then is bringing that to the team and setting that goal before them.
Can I just add on the Cheetham Hill thing? Looking back for a lot of the time of the Cheetham Hill church plant, if you look at the kind of evangelism networks that we had as a team, there were almost two quite distinct groups of network. So one of them was a kind of these networks of settled long-term resident Muslim women who were kind of in the networks of people who were there as missionaries already before the church plant started. The other networks were the kind of workmates and colleagues of a group of 20-something professionals who were generally outside Cheetham Hill. And those two things are like, those are hard to bring together if you know that that's what you're trying to do. But our church culture wasn't really trying to do either of those things.
Right.
But we didn't really ever articulate that, because I don't think we were aware enough of each other's networks, so to speak, to be able to do that.
Yeah, and you can see, have you got the stuff on the Toblerone of evangelism? Is that out there anywhere?
Yeah, I think I've sent that out to all of you guys.
So you've got the Toblerone of evangelism, and one of the triangles on the Toblerone, it says your relational fringe, people you hang out with, your institutional fringe, the people you're doing English class with. And what Dom is saying is there's actually a vast gulf between these two.
Yeah.
And then there's something called a no fringe, which is just people you meet cold. And actually, it was the no fringe who would often come into the church.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas I actually, when they planted Cheetham Hill, I felt like, well, there is actually opportunity there in the no fringe. But it was hard to build this common culture about okay, how are we going to do that? And that was part of my battle because I could see some of these things happening. I didn't necessarily address them. That actually the evangelists were not on the same page necessarily as the church leadership. They were doing two slightly different things. They didn't connect very well.
Yeah.
And it's so important they connect.
I think you're doing the right thing because when you come to Salford, I notice you take time with this other group of people to talk more with them rather than the other group of people, because our goal is to raise them. Sometimes when we have opportunity even to pray or to read, we allow it to this group that are coming up to do it.
Yeah, and this is so. There's a principle actually that I would. This isn't directly related to this phase of the church parliament, which is that. Okay, I'm going to put it in rugby terms. So I was a rugby player. So basically, in rugby, there are people who get the ball and people who use the ball, and when they work together, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And you know, sometimes the people who get the ball will use the ball, but you know, the forwards and the backs do different things on a rugby pitch. And what you'll see is the people who've made that first contact with unbelievers, who first draw somebody in, can only take them so far for various reasons.
Yeah.
So, for example, when I'm with Colleen, there have been times when I've been talking to somebody who speaks Urdu and I just can't get them beyond level X. I need Meri Dost. I need my friend to come in and like do some of the work.
Yeah.
Equally, you know, like on some of the, say, the baptism preparation stuff, or even in Hope Church with like Cantonese speakers, as soon as Robert and Sylvie get back and move into Levenshire, I'm going to be like, guys, I need help on this one. So, but it's really important that your church has a culture of knowing what to do when someone begins to turn to Christ. They're going to need one-on-one or one-on-two time.
Yeah.
And this is what you might call pastoring near the front lines. Just being very proactive about going to new Christians, non-Christians, working with them, just studying with them. You don't need to do it for the rest of their lives. But again, your church should know what it's doing with this. It's part of developing the call of the church and the opportunity. Like your church should bring those together. It's not like, okay, you know, one person is going to do the whole work of evangelism. It's not. It's about a body.
Yeah. Next slide.
Last one. Sorry.
Can there be a problem though when the church's vision is to target certain people and people who tell people about Jesus? God is not bringing the people who they're targeting. They're bringing other people. Do you know what I mean? They're bringing the homeless. They're bringing people who are addicts.
Okay. So.
And because this has happened to me, where you know, I've tried to target people they want in the church, but the people who come to faith were the homeless and addicts, not necessarily both together, or single people. But the church was targeting families, but they were in the centre of Wigan, and that wasn't who they were attracting. So I would then talk to the minister, bring the new people to them. Minister wasn't interested, didn't fit the target mode.
So we
wasn't
actually
interested in
had this
discipling
issue
them.
in the city centre.
Yeah, very difficult.
When we launched the city centre, that actually, I think it's fair enough to say Graham and Catherine in particular was super kind of keen. You know, she was really keen to work with those guys. So when you got really high needs people, integrating them into a community, which is not majority high needs, becomes very, very difficult. They've got behavioural issues. There's different things you've got to do. Now, interestingly, a couple came in who wanted to work specifically with like what I would call high needs people, And actually, at one point, says, "Well, we want to do a different congregation." So the issue is, you have to work out what works for the church culture. For example, here in Russia, we get high needs people, but there are a bunch, which is fine, but there are a bunch of things that we need to know. One is, some of them will just, like, drag us onto their agenda, and they're not necessarily very open to Christ.
No, I mean people who come to faith. They come to faith and they're genuine, but because they don't fit the mold of the church, they're not interested. Basically,
So
this is what I found.
So my theory on this, personally, I think that in those kind of situations, you would be better off. That person would be better off moving towards a bigger church that has more resources, but also has people within that church who are committed to helping those people.
Yeah.
Because if you have a number of people like that coming into a small church plant, they regularly crash them.
Yeah.
So actually, sort of naming names, Junction Church in Cheetham Hill moved into Cheetham Hill, picked up high needs people, crashed the church. And typically,
This wasn't a church plant. This was an existing church, and there was nowhere else to take them. They didn't have cars, so they couldn't go elsewhere. And what I'm meaning is, sometimes you might decide who you want to join your church, but God sends other people.
so the thing is, as we talk about church planting, we're also talking about the way that your teams become molded to your outreach. So if you're seeing that, if you're seeing a bunch of people who don't do that, I know what it's like. When I was 19, I went down to work in a middle class church in Margate. I spent most of my time at a council estate. The kids couldn't read; they were like semi-feral, some of them, and it was like you just couldn't bring them together. It was like it was really hard. But that was partly because I was only there for 6 months. And what I would hope for now is that 19-year-old would go to the vicar and say, "Look, I'm going to go. These kids, they genuinely want Christ. They don't have this, that, and the other. The middle class parents are going to freak out if they start coming to the church youth group because they don't want them there." So look, can we find people within this church who are actually going to commit, who are going to champion them, who are going to work with them? That's the way I would do it now.
I've just noticed this. Other churches I've been, sometimes I've been where the children's work is in the day, and they have an evening service, and people from the local estate came to the evening service. Now, they weren't just coming for a cup of tea. They were coming and they were worshipping. Do you know what I mean? These children. But they were saying, well, they'll have to come to the morning service, but they didn't want to come to the morning service. Do you know what I mean? It was like, God's, because I said to the minister, I said, well, God is sending these people, these children, teenagers, they want to know about Jesus. And they're coming. This is their time.
That's why you need leadership. So what you need. So if you're in that
They weren't adaptable, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that as you plant your church, you create structures within the church that work. Now, in a church plant, you might not be able to do that. You might not have enough people to work in 2 or 3 different places. In a bigger church, you would hope that you would be able to go to people and say, look, get a group of people, get someone who will champion them, or really get on their level, gather a team round, and sometimes say, look, you can't do that in the service. That's a no. But do it in a way that's loving and committed so that it doesn't just come across as we don't want your kind around here. But you need a team. You need people who are going to invest. And I think it's important to communicate well with leaders about sort of, I think it's always a good idea to say, Pastor, could we do this? Would you let me?
Yeah.
And so basically, because most pastors are like super keen for people to say, would you let me do this ministry? And would you let me take these people? It's like, it makes you want to cry. But obviously when we hear, and I speak as a pastor, when we hear it's like, why can't you do anything for these people? It doesn't
Makes you want to cry in a different way.
It makes you want to cry in a different way.
Yeah.
Stickability.
Stickability. We've already done stickability, and that's
Okay.
almost what this is about. It's like what makes people stick, what makes
Sure.
people work within culture.
Okay.
We're short of time. In fact, I think I only have 5 minutes left, right?
Okay.
I just want to say, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Your plan, or if you want a high culture reference, Tolstoy, who wrote War and Peace, absolutely hated Napoleon. He hated Napoleon. Napoleon invaded his country at birth, so you can kind of see why he would. But he basically said, Napoleon, like, what kind of general is Napoleon? Basically, as soon as the battle starts, you completely lose control of the army anyway. So why are we giving Napoleon all this credit for stuff? And often, as you say, when your church plant launches, things just don't happen the way you expect them to. And that's why we're going to go back to that and say, it's all about people.
Yeah.
It's not the heroes of church growth. And I'm not talking about kind of sort of plastic TV streamed mega churches, but the heroes of church growth, generally in small congregations, are the people who love the church, who lay down their lives for it, who deeply care about it, who are enthusiastic, who, you know, facing.
Who are always there.
Yeah, and actually, there's even a word for it. They are fat people. They are faithful, available, and teachable. You know, that's. These people are heroes, and you need them. You need to be one of them. But you also need your evangelists, and your evangelists are often kooks. They're sometimes weirdos.
Yeah.
They work super well. Some of them aren't even Christians. So, and your discipleship, again, we've talked about what it takes to push up into the lives of people who are new, come to Christ. You may not fit with the sort of majority culture of the church. Your adaptability is crucial. This is all about people. We talk about sort of having an evangelism strategy, and it's important, but it's also important that you're training your people so that they know what's going to happen. Again, I worked in West Africa, and I worked for a kind of sort of hands-on donor agency. And the best organisations were not the ones that had the best initial strategy. You could have a top initial strategy and just fail horribly. And you could have a pretty poor initial strategy and succeed wonderfully. The organisations that succeeded are the ones that got what was happening on the ground, fed it back into their decision making, and did the right kind of adaptation to work out, like, what do I need to get this job done? So they knew what they were there to do. They had a call. They saw opportunities and they said, okay, so what fits? What do we need to do? How do we need to change? And they get their staff on board. Their management had a good understanding of what was going on, sort of on the ground with the staff, and blah, blah, blah. And in reality, as you develop your vision for evangelism, you're going to get hit in the mouth. It's not going to happen the way you think. And then it's going to be you and your people going back to court, going back to opportunity, correcting course, working out what you need to do now. And so, as you think about, sure, I've got an evangelism strategy. I mean, do read this stuff in the thing. I know I haven't covered like all of it. But again, you're investing in people, you're building vision, you're getting them on board. So that's going to be the kind of crucial difference between doing it and not doing it. Any questions, comments, criticisms?
It's not a question, but